You know there's a problem when people need a second job just to live a standard lifestyle. Nothing extravagant, just your typical consumers. Today we've seen the economic statistics pile up and they're telling us that things are looking fantastic. Unemployment is at a record low. Inflation is almost non-existent. Consumer sentiment is very high. But for those who are willing to accept a painful dose of reality, there's some alternative information they need to see. And that's why you came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to talk about how despite all of the information that we are being provided on a daily basis, there's something else going on. It's not going to show up in the statistics ever. This is something that you have to connect the dots in order to understand. They will not do that in the mainstream media. The majority of people will never be able to do this because they take everything at face value. As long as everything stays the way it is for them, they are not going to understand. We are going to talk about that concept of disruption today. Let's begin with this. 1/3 of Americans say they need a side gig to pay expenses. So in this Market Watch article, they reference a survey that was done that's going to help us understand what's going on. Out of bankrate.com, many Americans are still living paycheck to paycheck. This is something that I have talked about in so many videos. Despite a healthy economy, that's their words, strong labor market, again, theirs not mine, 3 in 10 working Americans with a side hustle say they need the extra income to help cover the cost of regular living expenses. This isn't about buying lavish goods. This is about regular living expenses. Now, again, this is a sample size. In this case here, it's over 2,500 people. That is very small, and it is not something that we could say all Americans are experiencing this. No. What it does tell us, by piecing all of the others I've shown you together, that gives us an insight as to what's going on. Think about it. I have shown you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these surveys, and they all show the same thing. People live paycheck to paycheck. They spend all their money. If there is a disruption, they are going to be taken off of their normal everyday living standards, and they will end up in a very bad scenario. So when I see 2,500 people on this, we could move that in any direction if we were to actually survey the whole country. But to me, it just gives us a small piece of the puzzle, and that is what's important. We have seen income stagnation for quite some time, and even though incomes are back to where they were before the Great Recession, there's still a perception for a lot of people that their income is just not hitting their expenses. Even if incomes are going up, expenses seem to be going up even faster. To me, that is very telling. Overall, nearly half of working Americans, 45%, report having a gig outside of their primary job. That's true for 43% of full-time workers. Now, I personally think there's nothing wrong with having a side gig. There's nothing wrong with having a second job. In fact, that's probably the best thing for most people. Bring in a second source of income. If you lose the first one, you're good because you have something coming in. At the same time, it gives you more money to save. It gives more money to put down on your debt. It gives you a chance to invest in other things. There are many benefits to having a second income, but you should not need a second source of income. The average person working a 9 to 5, things have really changed these days. We were looking back in time, seeing how many individuals were working their 9 to 5. They had a pension coming to them, so they just needed to stay at that job for a long period. They would be set for life. But unfortunately today, things don't work like that anymore. Not only do people have to work that job and then fend for themselves after they retire, but they also have to figure out a way to pay for their expenses today. And it's only getting worse as time goes on. How employed side hustlers use their extra income. Remember, this is people who are already employed. We asked, which one of the following best describes what you use the extra money you earn on the side for? I want to note, first of all, this one here, 30% paying for regular living expenses. Now, there is a large group of people also, over 30%, that are using the disposable income for spending. They want to go on vacation. They want to buy an iPhone. They want to buy a Mac computer. I understand that's what they're doing. And so this tells us that not everybody requires this second source of income to be able to pay for their expenses. But 1/3 of people, which I consider to be a very big number, in this case, they do. Millennials, the side hustle generation, the percentage of respondents who say they earn income on the side, broken down by generation. So we're seeing millennials, Generation X, and baby boomers. And as you go older in the generations, it seems like there are less people with a side hustle. And again, I do believe that the primary factor here has been these individuals that are maybe the baby boomers. They had been relying on their pensions. Maybe they're thinking about different things than a millennial is today. At the same time, the starting salaries for millennials are going to be much lower for people than they were as an individual maybe that were starting work 50 years ago in comparison to the living expenses. Okay, so not necessarily the actual wage was higher, but in comparison to the living expenses, we are in big trouble today. So there are a few factors that are going on here. How much employed side hustlers make in a typical month? Overwhelmingly, it looks like over 70% of people make $500 or less. So that tells you here how much these people are really making. Now, the average monthly income is over $1,000, but you could just see on this chart here that most of the people, overwhelmingly, it is only $500 or less. So people aren't necessarily able to bring in a lot from their second source of income, and I do believe that they would really like this to be higher. High costs are keeping many Americans from summer vacation. This is another survey that was done, and towards the bottom it says, why aren't people going on vacation? The most popular reason 60% of respondents cited as to why they weren't planning a vacation is simple. They can't afford it. There's something going on today. Now, personally, I don't think people necessarily need to go on vacation, but people do not have the disposable income that they once did. So what happens when there is disruption? People are employed today. They have their first income. They have their second income. They are looking at all of the issues that are surrounding them. But as long as they are employed, as long as food stays at the same price, as electricity stays at the same price, as long as all of these factors are lined up, there's nothing to worry about until they enter disruption. Maybe they lose their job. Maybe it's a medical emergency. Maybe they have personal problems. And this comes up too many times. You can ask around. I'm sure your acquaintances or people that you know are facing this at some point in their life. It happens and it's truly unfortunate. Then everything gets thrown upside down. The unemployment rate for the U.S. tech workers just hit the lowest number ever recorded. Fantastic. We see that this particular field is booming more than it ever has been before. These companies are the highest valuations. We've seen all these unicorn companies popping up everywhere. They're worth billions of dollars all over the place. This is one factor. Connected in with that, the unemployment rate is 3.6%. Now you can see a pattern that forms over and over again. This is coming out of the Fred website. This tells you something. When you look at the gray shaded areas, this occurs over and over again. The gray shaded areas, recessions, okay? Every single time in history, the unemployment rate is heading lower and lower and lower, and then a recession hits. It doesn't start to climb up higher and then a recession hits. It goes lower and lower. Of course, there are bumps along the way, but it happens even in the slightest, as you can see here in the 80s. It is just a factor every single time. The same pattern is occurring. Today we have some of the lowest rates we have ever seen before, and of course this is not necessarily a good thing because of the statistics that I've been showing you. It's not in the benefit that we have seen where more people are doing better today than before. In fact, they are living paycheck to paycheck more than they ever have. So this one is going to be a very problematic scenario into the future. Personal consumption expenditures excluding food and energy. Wow, what does this sound like to you? Well, of course, this is the PCE rate. PCE rate is what the Federal Reserve loves to use. Why? Because it's the most manipulated of all inflation rates possible. You're looking at a rate of 1.6%. 1.6%, my goodness. They're telling us for the past 2 decades, essentially, that inflation hasn't picked up whatsoever. That you are having to spend 1.6% more on your goods and services every year, and that's it. 1.6%. Now, number one, they exclude food and energy, and they're trying to measure how much people are paying on a year-to-year basis. You got something confused up in your head, because if you exclude the two most important factors, surely you're going to have a skewed vision of what's actually occurring. How can you do that? Well, it's too volatile. We can't do that. It's just simply too volatile. You have to figure out a way to calculate it, and you can't exclude it. It is simply manipulation. How can they do this? And yet people, they don't know. They don't even know it excludes food and energy, but they just hear in the media inflation rate 1.6% or inflation very low. They keep hearing that. Okay, inflation very low. They could go to the store and pay $20 for a coffee tomorrow. They wouldn't even know. They would just blame it on the coffee shop. They have no idea what's happening with central banks and with their activities and how that affects the prices at the store. They simply are dumbfounded when the prices are higher than what they were before. They don't know how central banks operate. Understand reality, understand the truth, and then you can see what's really going on. If you found this video informative, I would really appreciate a thumbs up, because when you give me a thumbs up, you are supporting this channel, so thank you for that. If you want the financial education you were not taught in school, these 2 books have everything you need from top to bottom, from A to Z. All the details are in these 2 books, so check them out at the link in the description. If you want the audiobook, that's available at themoneygps.com. If you want to know what's really going on in the economy, well then you got to watch this video, so click on it and I will see you there.